Hi folks. Today we're going to talk about what do you do when your guitar, either your electric or your acoustic, won't play in tune. What do you check for? What do you need to do? What do you look for? We're going to go through all those different steps. We're not going to go literally show you how to fix each of those steps today, but I will explain what the process is. I will over the next few weeks put out more videos about each step in particular and how to correct for each step. So let's get started right away. So how do we fix a guitar that won't play in tune? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to do some inspection of the guitar and see if you can see where the problem is. First thing I do generally is I'll take the guitar and I'll check it for a proper setup. Does it have a proper setup? Is the truss rod set up properly? Is it curved too much? Is there something going on there that's making it play out of tune in some places on the neck? Is the intonation at the saddle set up properly? Are these saddles set up properly for intonation for the strings? I check the action. Is the action very high or too low? Is it set up in some sort of unusual way where some of the strings are high and some are low? The saddles are set up at different heights. That can cause it to play kind of out of tune depending. And also, I look for, of course, on an electric guitar, I look for the height of the pickups. Are the pickups doing something funny to pull the strings out of tune when it's played? So I want to determine when somebody gives me a guitar and they say it's not playing in tune. I first want to make sure, I check the setup, but I also want to make sure that the intonation problem is not part of the build. Now, currently in these days, generally the frets are set by CNC machine. They're done very precisely. They're not likely to be set up wrong. However, it used to be older guitars, old Stellas, Ks, whatever, sometimes handmade. It might be beautiful, handmade, but they might not have set the frets very well. And the frets might not play in tune where they are. This fret might be a little too far up the fingerboard, whatever. Anything could happen. They could be unusual. That's something you can almost spot. If the frets aren't graduated evenly going all the way up, if all of a sudden you notice that a couple of frets seem closer than they should be, that'll certainly make it play out of tune. And that's not something you can fix easily. It can be fixed, but it's not going to be something that you're going to be able to fix easily generally unless you do your own fret work. I also want to make sure the frets are properly spaced. Even with a digital tuner, if you plug a digital tuner into the guitar or use one that can pick up sound, and you just go up the strings and just check E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, and make sure it's hitting dead center, going right up. I want to check for a proper neck angle. Now this is real important on acoustic guitars and on electrics too, but sometimes acoustic guitars over the years, the neck heel, the neck itself will just change its angle a little bit, or it'll come up a little forward, and then this has to be set lower, and you get to the point where you almost have high action, or you can have high action even with the saddle almost gone. It's cut so low, it's so far down that it's almost gone. The problem with that is what happens is when it starts to come up, when it starts going like this, it literally is shortening the distance between the saddle and the nut. And then now all the frets are going to play wrong. They're generally going to play sharp. You can compensate for that sometimes with the saddle. Cut the saddle, compensate it so it's the strings are hitting further back on the saddle. But really, in that case, you really need a neck reset and that sort of thing. There are other things that can be done, but that's generally the right way to do it. You have the neck reset, and that'll fix that intonation problem. You want to check to see if there's any problems with the tuning machines. So these machines here, these are covered tuners. So let me grab a guitar that has the tuners that you can see what's going on. First, let me show you again the basic makeup of a tuner by showing you the inside. Here's a single tuner. It has the pinion gear, that's this round one here. that little round gear. It has a worm gear. That's this one here. And when, I turn it this way, when you turn the worm gear, it turns the pinion gear, which then turns the post where the string is attached. Got it? Okay. On either side of this worm gear, you have, on one side you have the button. The other side you just have like a little end that sticks out, and it stays, or it attaches to the base plate of the gear with these little stays on either side. There's these little, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, you can see it there. And on this side, that's this little thing that sticks up and holds both sides. Okay, so that's how a gear is made. Even solid gears are made like that. Ones that are die cast, they're essentially that same sort of thing, but inside of a cast shell, so that it's lubricated, stays lubricated, and may last for a long time. Okay, now here's the problem. Sometimes companies will purposely make a tuner that doesn't have a stay on both sides. It's not a good way to go because, as you might imagine, that means that one side's flopping around. And here's an example of that. This is an Epiphone. See if I can, there you go, you can see the E there. This is an Epiphone tuner that came off of that guitar back there. And I noticed when I got the guitar that the tuners didn't work very well. They are covered, and in fact, you almost would think they were die cast because they were covered and riveted together, but it's just a cover. And I was wondering, why is this working so poorly? I would turn it and had a lot of looseness to it and just didn't feel right. Sure enough, I popped it apart. There's, like I said, a little rivet on both sides. I popped it apart, and it's only connected with a stay on one side. You can see this side of it has no stay. It just can flop around. And so what that does is when it's sitting up against the gear, it only is connected on one side, so the gear can move around. And that makes for a really bad gear, bad tuning gear. So I replaced them on that guitar, and it made a big difference. But so that's another thing that can cause tuning problems, issues. Let's see here. Improper nut slots that are cut poorly can cause a lot of problems. And in fact, this is one of the first things I look at. If it's not cut, like here's the strings are going this way, and then you can see it has a breakaway angle going back to the tuning pegs. If the nut is cut flat, straight like this way, and not at an angle coming back, it can cause a tuning problem, real serious tuning issue. It can also, if it's cut poorly, in other words, it wasn't smoothed out after it was cut, what will happen is you'll be tuning the strings, but instead of hearing that nice smooth change in pitch, you'll hear it go ding, 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 and it'll sort of jump slight amounts in pitch. That's the bottom of the slot has little grooves in it, and it's like grabbing that string on the windings of the string. And that can be a real problem. You'll try to tune it and you just can't get it there. You'll have your tuner going, here's center, and it'll be like just a little sharp, and then you'll go back and it'll go tink, and it'll be back here, and then tink, it'll be back sharp. Ugh. That needs to be fixed right away, and that's not that hard to do. It's generally done with a fret file or some sort of jeweler's knife file, and or a little bit of very fine sandpaper, 800, 1,000 grit, 1,500 grit, 2,000 grit. Fold it in half, put it in the slot, run it back and forth to smooth it out. And if you can get rid of those little bumps, the little ridge in there, it'll be fine. However, after you do that, you want to also take a pencil. Now these happen to be nice soft soft graphite pencils, and you want to pull the string out of the slot and run this in the bottom, just like like that. Sometimes you got to turn it back and forth a little bit, and then pop it back in, and now you can hear the string will move smoothly in there. This is a big deal. You need to do this every time you change your strings. Just get all the slots filled with a little bit of this, put it in. Any extra left over after the strings are in there, you can just brush off wipe off, it'll come off. But you want to have some lubricant, dry lubricant, between the string and the bottom of the slot. Do not use a liquid or some sort of gel lubricant. Don't use petroleum jelly. Don't use any kind of oil. I don't care what you think. Carol told you it's a good thing to use. Don't. Any kind of goop or liquid can and will attract dirt and dust and will eventually make the slot stickier than it ever was. And that can be a real drag to clean out. You want to inspect, here's another thing. So that's one of the first things I check on a guitar. If the guitar's set up properly, I check the nut. If the nut's fine, if it's moving through there smoothly, I check to see what's going on with the strings. Has the person strung it wrong? Often, you'll find people will string the guitar. Let's see if I can show you one here. Here we go. On the string tree, you'll see there's only like 2 or 3 windings around there, and they're all smooth and cut perfectly. That's the way you want it. You don't want to have one where, like, here's the string tree and you have like windings overlapping each other like this. Somebody's got a million windings. Often they'll have the excess part of the string wound up in a loop over top of the guitar. That's terrible, because what happens is when they do a bend, that string can change, and all of a sudden now the string's out of tune. It can like move slightly over those weird windings that they overlapped. You don't want to have that happen. So I'll often just restring the guitar properly, and it's good to go. How do I restring a guitar? I'll make a lot of enemies here right now, but I'm going to tell you the same way Martin taught me many years ago. I've been doing this since the 80s. Is I do a luthier's knot, and it's people say, oh, they're hard to remove, and when time is of essence, they're impossible to remove. No, they aren't. If they're done right, they take an extra half a second. Literally, that was it. That's how much longer it would take. That half second. Without, there you go. From that much more time. Because all you have to do is you just bring the string, instead of going to the, just up to where the string goes through, you go just slightly past it. Just pull it around half a turn more. And you're not turning anything, you're just pulling the string off. It comes right out. Just like that. So, and people I know who have sworn by the way they've tuned their guitars forever, the same way, put it through and I wind it around once over top and twice underneath. It's perfect, it never slips. And then they come to me and they say it's not staying in tune. I tune it properly with a luthier's knot, stays in tune, they never have a problem again. So I don't have the freedom to send a guitar to somebody's home, an owner's home, with it going out of tune. It's got to be perfect when I give it to them. I depend on that, and it works. And so does Martin, so do a lot of other companies. Okay, here's a few other things that can be a problem of intonation on an electric guitar specifically. Electric guitars, many of them, not all, obviously Les Pauls don't generally have vibratos or tremolo systems, but a lot of the Fender types do. And this is like sort of a Fender type Ibanez of the Strat type. Some of them will have 6 little bolts down here, 6 little screws that screw into the top that hold the tremolo in place. If they're not set right, that can be a real problem. And how would you know they're not set right? Well, if they're different heights, I know that's a problem already. But generally, they think, oh, I need to tighten these down. No. They shouldn't be fully tight to the top. They should be backed off a little bit. And a person who has experience doing this can do it in a few minutes. I do it all the time. But if they're set improperly, unevenly or whatever, you're going to end up with all sorts of tuning problems. You'll go to bend a string and it'll pull just enough so it doesn't sit back at the right spot, especially if it's floating. If it's not floating, if it's against the top, then you just got to make sure that it stays against the top, and you put extra springs on the back if you want. I don't use my whammy except for very rarely, so I just have 4 springs back there, so when I bend, none of the strings go out of tune, ever. That's one thing that can be done. If it's a pivot type, like this is a pivot type, you can see right down there, it pivots. There's like a front area here that holds the whole thing pivots in there. The whole tremolo pivots in there. And they also make the type that is very common now are two pivot bars or two pivot posts that the tremolo pivots on. Again, they can be set to be floating and stay in tune very nicely. If they're not, it could be that you have a little edge or a little bump in the pivot area that can cause that to not sit properly each time. It should always go back to exactly the same place. So that's another thing to look for in intonation wise. Obviously, setting the saddles properly. Setting on these are easy. You know, you've got 6 screws here. They set the length. Bang, you're done. It's pretty easy. But we'll talk more about that in another one of these videos. Another thing that on an electric, by the way, that can cause intonation problems is if the pickups are set too high. If the pickups are too close to the strings, they create too much of a magnetic field. It can pull the string out of tune, or at the very least, it can pull the string in such a way that as it vibrates, it gives off a weird harmonic. You'll get like a sound or some sort of weird sound. So they need to be not too close. These are pretty close, but these are single coils and not very strong single coil magnets. Humbuckers can be quite strong, high output ones, and you know, they can create some funny sounds and certainly even put the guitar out of tune. So that's another thing. By the way, if you don't need to use the tremolo and you have a tremolo on your guitar, you can block it. You can either put a block in there or you can put an extra spring on so it holds down tight. You sit it flat to the top. It will give the guitar a little more sustain and I think a little better tone actually. But you know, you have to decide that if you're the owner. Okay, boy, I ran through a lot of things that you can do here. Try them out. If you're having problems with intonation on your guitar, start from the beginning. I'll review really fast. Check the setup first. Is it set up properly? If it's set up properly, the truss rod's right, the action height's right, the saddle's right, the neck angle is right, the nut's right. Check the nut. Make sure it is right and make sure it's lubricated. Make sure you lubricate it with a pencil. If that's not the problem, check to make sure it's strung properly. Those are the two problems I see most of all when somebody brings me a guitar and says, I can't keep it in tune. Those are the problems I see most often. It can be something more intense than that. It can be a bad neck angle. It can be a bad tuner. You know, like I showed you, I bought a guitar brand new and had bad tuners on it. So that can happen. But generally, you're going to find it's going to be the nut, or the way they strung it, or just the intonation, setup of the intonation at the saddle and where the bridge is. Those are the things you're going to look for most, but it could be any of these things. There's about a dozen things, and until you have it in your hands, there's no way to tell. Some people always come up to me and they go, oh, my guitar's not playing in tune. Can you tell me what the problem is? Yes, if you let me see it. I got to have it in my hands. Once it's in my hands, I can tell very quickly what the problem is and how to fix it. And hopefully, now you can too. Take care.